Before we start, I want to be very clear about two things. First, this conversation is confidential. And second, what you're about to see is not a product pitch. It's a deep dive into what becomes possible when market truth is treated like infrastructure instead of marketing. This work is being led by Steve Colino, and the idea is simple but radical. What if access to truth in real estate worked like a public utility? Always on. Open access, no agenda, no spin. This isn't about replacing professionals or telling consumers what to do. It's about removing distortion. Only data, only facts, only options. Everything a consumer is already entitled to see. Presented neutrally, defensibly, and without persuasion. Think of this as a thought experiment made real. A framework for radical transparency. Once you see it, it's hard to unsee. My name is Steve Colino, and this is Confidential Remarks. The real estate industry doesn't actually suffer from a lack of data. It suffers from selective visibility. The old model hides inefficiencies behind storytelling, branding, and lifestyle imagery. The truth engine does the opposite. It surfaces inefficiencies directly and without apology. On the left is persuasion. On the right is measurement. No photos, no slogans, no glam, just metrics that answer uncomfortable questions. This isn't about blaming anyone. It's about acknowledging that over 100 years of market behavior has been obscured by incentives that reward perception over performance. The promise here is simple. If something costs more, it should perform better. If it doesn't, the data should say so. Trust doesn't start with opinions. It starts with baselines. This layer establishes a neutral snapshot of the market using publicly defensible data. Median prices, days on market, sale to list ratios, inventory levels. Nothing exotic, nothing proprietary, just reality measured consistently. What matters here is scope. This can be viewed by metro, by zip code, or by price band. Same rules, same math, same transparency. When everyone sees the same baseline, arguments disappear. Not because people agree, but because reality becomes shared. This is where discomfort usually starts. Transaction costs are technically disclosed, but they're rarely visualized, compared, or contextualized. This view turns the settlement statement into a system. Instead of percentages floating in abstraction, we see where money actually goes, how it stacks, and how widely outcomes vary. The critical insight here is that commissions aren't just a fee on price. They're often a massive percentage of the seller's actual profit. This doesn't tell anyone what's fair. It simply shows what is. And once people see it, they naturally start asking better questions. This is where things get fun. The overpayment index doesn't judge people. It measures outcomes. It asks a brutally simple question. Did the consumer receive proportional value for what they paid? Each point here represents a real transaction. Some fall into positive value. Others land in the zero value zone, where high costs produce no measurable improvement in outcome. This is not opinion. It's math. And math doesn't care about branding, confidence, or charisma. It only cares about results. Here's where abstraction turns tangible. When inefficiency is mapped geographically, cost becomes a kind of local tax. 2 zip codes, same market conditions, same price bands, completely different consumer outcomes. This reframes the conversation. The issue isn't individuals, it's structural inefficiency embedded in geography. Once you see this, it becomes impossible to claim that pricing is purely rational or performance-based across the market. The industry often talks about opportunity. The data talks about saturation. Most licensed agents close very few transactions. A tiny percentage produce the majority of results. That gap creates friction, noise, and cost that consumers ultimately absorb. This isn't a talent issue, it's a math issue. Oversupply dilutes accountability and masks performance. When consumers can't see this distribution, They assume uniform competence. The data quietly proves otherwise. When workforce density is layered against consumer cost, the relationship becomes undeniable. Oversaturation isn't just inefficient, it's expensive. This view shows that where agent density spikes, consumer costs rise without corresponding improvements in outcomes. At that point, inefficiency stops being an industry problem and becomes a consumer burden. This slide tends to make people nervous, and that's intentional. The influencer economy thrives on visibility, not verification. This system removes headshots entirely. No photos, no slogans, just anonymized performance metrics. Success isn't claimed, it's measured. When perception is removed, credibility becomes purely mathematical. And that's uncomfortable for anyone who relies on narrative instead of outcomes. All of this runs through a very boring, very powerful principle: aggregation, anonymization, and reproducibility. Inputs are public data sources. Outputs are indices, maps, and rankings that can be independently verified. Every metric is traceable. Every claim is defensible. This is the firewall against pushback. You don't argue with math. You either accept it or you improve your performance. This is the final contradiction. If a small fraction of agents control a disproportionate share of transactions, why is pricing so uniform across the entire market? In most industries, concentration leads to differentiation. Here, it doesn't. The data doesn't answer the question. It forces the question, and that's far more powerful. This is where it all lands. We are not telling consumers what to do. We are not ranking morality or intent. We are simply turning on the lights. Once people see the full game board, behavior changes naturally. Not because they were persuaded, but because they were informed. Open access to truth doesn't disrupt markets. It corrects them. And once that switch is flipped, there's no going back. This has been Confidential Remarks.